Well, the big stories today are the city selling for $32 million, the Chattanooga hotel, getting out of the hotel business with that behemoth that cost taxpayers millions, that cost debt, millions and millions in debt, Daisy Madison, and the city declining to sell at lower offers and selling only after a competitive bidding process that brought in enough money to pay for all the debt, all the IOUs the city had contracted to build that business, to build the infrastructure of that business. It's good to have the city get out. It's good that there's slightly less higher profile for commercial government in Chattanooga. I think if we see how do you determine that commercial government is bad? Where does the badness begin? How do you know that it's something you should retreat from? At what point do you say, we've gone far enough in having government as business partner, government as chief funder, government as economic leader? How do you know when you've gone far enough and you say, we've gone as far as we can go and we think we need to go back? Well, on what grounds do you need to go back? Well, I'd say that one important ground is that you're reducing your exposure to the wildness and the volatility of a fiat credit money economy. That's what we have today in our national economy, and it's debt based. It's run by the Federal Reserve System, the Fed, the private bankers bank, the government's lender, the lender of last resort for collapsed fractional reserve lenders around the country. In other words, the body that provides liquidity once FDIC runs out of money. Well, of course, FDIC doesn't have any money at all. FDIC is hugely in debt to the national government and has no capital per se, except it is a conduit for free money from more borrowing if there is a crisis. So you have this economy. It's unstable, and there's nothing really under it, and the valuations on stocks keep going up and up and up. And this is not the real world. You, my listener, need to get real. This is not the real world. And by the time you realize, it's too late, okay? Better to be a year too early in getting out than an hour too late. Maybe 2 years too early, maybe 3 years too early than an hour too late. Because once the thing starts, once the avalanche begins, you're not going to be able to get out of the way quickly enough, and you'll be selling in a strong downdraft. And at some point in that downdraft, there won't be buyers. And then you'll have a cataclysmic fall back to 1,500 on the Dow, and that's probably where it needs to be. So we've gotten used to the drunken party at the central bank and at the spigots of credit where new money is made. You, my listener, don't have that benefit. Neither do I. I have to earn my money. I have to provide a service to get every dollar into my business, and so do you. But the fractional world, the money making world, does not. And always, success breeds excess, and that is what we have now. And so Chattanooga has gotten out of the housing, retail, not the housing, but the hotel market, a market overbuilt. If you look around, there are hotels going up everywhere. I'm down at City Church the other night, picking a son up, and noticing all around there at that interchange, just hotel after hotel. How do these places keep in business? Where do they get the data saying that we're going to be economically viable if we build a hotel there at the interchange between Shalford Road and the interstate? Where do these numbers come from? Where do these expectations come from? Well, they come from a very heady view, a very intoxicated view of what's possible in America. One that is hugely over-optimistic. And so the city is saving itself a headache downstream, getting out now. And Daisy Madison overseeing that. The city's getting $32 million, being able to pay off all of its debts. The other story is, of course, that if you're just joining us, the story of the Tennessee Valley Federal Credit Union sponsoring a crowdfunding site that's run on a platform, one that shaves 6% off the transactions, called Growth Fountain, and that is a service. I think it's probably a very well paid service just to run some software, and it allows for changes that are just now allowed in the change in the federal statute to come into effect. And that is to say, a lococentric and nougacentric concept of investing. This is something that I've been talking about for a long time here on the David Tulis Show. This show, by the way, is 5 years old, just about. And I'm not having counted the days and weeks, but it's about 5 years old. And I remember some of my very early presentations to you, my listener, were on the point of the need for lococentric investing, where the claims of geography, the claims of proximity, the claims of nearness, the claims of neighborliness have a weight in how people invest. And the thinking that I've always had, thanks to writers such as Michael Schumann, whose book is Local Dollars, Local Cents, How to Shift Your Money from Wall Street to Main Street and Achieve Real Prosperity. Encouraged by writers like him, I've been saying we need to have something like this to come about, a local investment hub, if you will, where you can invest in local businesses. And you're doing that not just because you're gracious and kind and loving. That's not why you're doing it. There's some of that. Your main goal, of course, is to improve your value and to make a profit with someone and to profit along with them after they do all the work, right? You supply the capital, the money, they do all the work, and both of you prosper together, right? But he couldn't do it without you, and you couldn't make prosperity in that field without him. So together, you work, and you go about your business and invest in him, and he uses that money and generates a service or product and makes a profit at some point. 5 years out, he makes a profit, or 6 or 7 years out, maybe 10. He's going to make a profit, and you are going along with him for the ride. So these are the two big stories. And it's the Tennessee Valley Federal Credit Union has this platform on its website, and you can look it over. I read it with some care this morning, the discussion about that, what the risks are. You are investing, even if you take the option, which is called the revenue share agreement. There are two ways of obtaining your profit. You can share the revenues by getting a percentage, a small percentage, up to 2 times the amount you invest. So Tommy Nix gave the example of let's say put in $100, you can share in the revenues until you get back $200, right? And however long it takes, you get that money back at some point. And of course, we have in the background of this whole story, we have inflation and the problem of inflation, which is much higher than the less than 2% that we're told by the national government is the rate. The real rate is much higher depending on the sector. In some sectors, it's 15%. But maybe averaged out, probably, I'm just guessing wildly, we have probably an annual inflation rate of 7 or 8%. It's just not showing up in your food bill or your electrical bill. Well, this is David Tulis, and these are good stories. Less commercial government and more prospect in local investing. The investment prospect came from the change in the statute, as I was mentioning, from 2012, the American, what is it called now? The Jobs Act. The Jobs Act of 2012, signed by President Obama. And Tommy Nix, Riley says it's revolutionary. And the effects of that, the permissions in that, following a very lengthy time of writing of the regulations, is now here. And so we have opening up before us the prospect of lococentric investing. And I say that's not the only thing that should be, of course. You should be able to invest wherever you want to. And of course, liquid capital flows globally are highly, highly mobile, and everywhere in the world you have capital seeking its highest return. There are problems that come with that, no doubt. And Wendell Berry, who's going to be speaking here soon at a literary conference, is among those who have pointed out the problems with that. And that could be, you might say, a dehumanization of people, the commodification of people, the commodification of labor, and many of the things that are part of the financialization of the economy. And again, financialization has grown to be very, very damaging, very, very bad. And that's because 25% of the American almost 25% of the American economy is financialized. That means to say the profits, some gigantic profits, come not from any actual work, not from any mining or harvesting of anything, not from the actual creation of a good or service or an invention. It's simply gambling, the gambling economy. And the main engine for that is the variations of of value in paper money systems and bets on insurance, and it's kind of a betting market. So that's a very complex economy that you can read about in the Wall Street Journal and your high flying financial magazines. That's where you learn more about that. And I'm the slow man at Chattanooga. I ask the dumb questions, right? And because I ask the dumb questions, I'm not. If I say I'm in the media, don't believe him. That's what Mayor Burke says about me, and he's right. I'm not in the media. I'm in the press, and so I'm way below these high things. Okay, I'm very slow on those things, slow to grasp these things, and I hope you're joining me for the ride as we explore local economy and trying to do better for ourselves here in Chattanooga. We are a Nooga-centric show, and I'm the leading Nooga-centrist in Chattanooga, though Dave Crockett of high-speed rail fame and city council fame, and recently the mayor race fame, he claims to be the leading Nooga-centrist. Now, I want to get to something about the alienation process that has kind of preoccupied me for some many years actually, but and my goal in my own life is to gain myself back, right? To kind of buy myself back from a servitude. And one effort I had in that process was the rescission of a Social Security number back in the early 2000s, late 1990s. And I was told by the Court of Appeals in Tennessee that, well, I still had a Social Security number, so I guess I do. I was not able to redeem myself, and perhaps I'm irredeemable in that sense. But the idea of being estranged from my own inheritance is one that has moved me as a Christian. How did I get in this position? What are its legal ramifications? How is it actually done, practically speaking? Are these patriot myths that describe these claims against me, or are they real? And so because I've been concerned about being an alien in my own country, being a stranger in my own land, I have learned about the immigrant here. Right, these are people who are from south of the border. Some of them are here illegally. We have 11 million illegals in this country of 260 million people, and they're called undocumented. I have a very great sympathy for the undocumented because they are often the simplest people and often the best people. Some of the best people I know are undocumented. They really have had a great effort to be that way, and many of them have been in distress, living in the cash economy. Now, I was going to get to the whole Cuba situation, and I'm suddenly thinking, boy, I've said so many other things to get to Cuba that I haven't gotten to that, and I'm not doing justice to the analysis that I wanted to give about, or just the review briefly about alienation. But just in a nutshell, Cuba was upheld. If you go to LouRockwell.com, Jeff Thomas today, Cuba has been upheld by the free market and the gray market, the you might even say the black market. And through the various permutations of Fidel Castro's rule, it has provided the livelihood for many, many Cubans. In other words, illegal jobs, illegal businesses, off the books businesses, right? Businesses that are not in view, businesses with which you engage privately in arrangements often that cannot be enforced in court, right? Because courts are public, courts are where the government is, and you can't really use them. So there's a whole informal economy, you could say. And here's a line. Anyone who embezzled state-owned goods, sold his paintings on the street, or rolled cigars for tourists was living better than degreed professionals. So why then was this new class not crushed by the government? Well, the average bureaucrat had the opportunity to provide permission, look the other way, or divert state-owned goods, and himself become one of the new rich. The black market benefited virtually everyone. This is describing the period from 1990 to 1999, the special period in Cuba. This brought about a profound change in the Cuban people. The older generation who remembered the Batista days often remained dedicated to the revolution, right? Because the revolution anything was better than Batista, who was a cartel operator. But younger Cubans were less interested in revolutionary platitudes, right? We would say in our day here, the progressive platitudes of progressive Republican and Democrat government and collectivist rhetoric, and were more interested in Cuba in the new prosperity, no matter how moderate it was by international standards. Conditions improved over the decade of the special period. but expanded dramatically when failed Venezuelan revolutionary Hugo Chavez came to Cuba in 97. He was treated as a hero on his arrival and was promoted unceasingly by Mr. Castro. In gratitude, when Mr. Chavez became president of Venezuela in 1999, he provided much needed oil and goods to Cuba and the Cuban economy. This did not eliminate the black market. It enriched it like never before. The economy expanded. And by the time Fidel Castro handed the reins of state to his brother Raul, the writing was on the wall. Over the years, such a large percentage of Cubans were operating off the books businesses that they became the backbone of the economy. Increasingly, free market suppression was lifted to allow these suentopropistas, is the name, to legally operate, since if they were licensed, they could be taxed, thereby funding the state, which up until this time had not been getting enough of a cut from the black market. So you see what happened. And now, of course, there's even more liberalization. And the takeaway here is that whether it be Cuba, Zimbabwe, Argentina, or Venezuela, overregulation by any government causes a black market to be spontaneously created by the people of the country. And, I think that's what we want here. We want there to be a gray market, a free market. And some parts of the country, Montana, many parts of the hill country lived in by, or occupied or peopled by the descendants of the Scots-Irish. There you have a lot of that kind of, off books, off market economy. Eventually, even top government leaders come to rely on the black market as it works better than the oppressive system. And at some point, the black market becomes legalized and morphs into a free market. That's what we want here in Chattanooga, is a free market. And we have to wait until the lights go out in Washington. However, will the lights go out in Washington? I hope so. Now, about the stranger, and here are the strangers. I mention them because in this context, because they are often those who have the out of the back part of your car businesses, right? The trunk cooks, right? People who make burritos and lunch fare arrive in old cars in fields where the hands are and sell from the trunks of their cars, all in cash, right? That is a free market. And when you hear a story of any such person being harassed or arrested or seized, then you should be indignant. You should be indignant because we are required as Christians to look out for the welfare of the stranger. And if a stranger dwells with you in your land, you shall not mistreat him, Leviticus 19. You shall love him as a native. The stranger who dwells among you shall be to you as one born among you, and you shall love him as yourself. For you were strangers in the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. That's Leviticus 19, 34. And you cannot oppress the stranger. If you oppress the stranger, we read I don't have the citation here. The fatherless and the widow, and do not shed innocent blood in this place, or walk after other gods to your hurt. Goes on to say in Jeremiah 22, thus says the Lord, execute judgment and righteousness, and deliver the plundered out of the hand of the oppressor. Do no wrong, and do no violence to the stranger, the fatherless or the widow, nor shed innocent blood in this place. And in Ezekiel, the prophet, we read this, and it shall be that in whatever tribe the stranger dwells, there you shall give him his inheritance, says the Lord. And even the Lord Jesus speaks of strangers, and it's in this context. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you took me in. And in Matthew 25, when did we see you, a stranger, and take you in, or naked and clothe you? And the Lord says, I was a stranger, and you did not take me in, naked, and you did not clothe me, sick and in prison, and you did not visit me. So there's a condemnation if we don't care for the stranger and look after him, and there's a blessing if we do. Now, in the old Israel, in the old republic, you were a citizen by circumcision. In other words, you became a citizen by religion, by conversion to God, love of God. And Israel was peopled throughout by all kinds of people who were not genetic Jews, right? Genetic Israelites. Even Caleb was a Kenizzite. He was not of the DNA of Moses. And there were many others as well. Think of Uriah the Hittite, a faithful retainer of King David. He was a faithful, godly man, and he was an Israelite by conversion, right? He was not a terrorist. He lived serving the king in an open country. And the fact that the Hebrew Republic was an open country, it was not a military empire. As all the surrounding countries were military empires with slaves, right? The Israelites, they had slaves too, but there was a great lenity towards slaves, and people fled there. People came to that country to escape, right? Because it was a sanctuary country. Old Israel was a sanctuary country. It had its own sanctuary cities, by the way, that are described in the book of Leviticus and elsewhere. And those were the ones to which a man who kills another man by accident could flee to avoid the avenger of blood. And so there you could have justice work its way out, and there could be a trial and inquest into the death or the wrong that he committed, and it could be shown that he was not a murderer deserving of death, but had been involved in an accident. So you had in that country the sanctuary cities, and it was a sanctuary country. It was sanctuary because of its perfect and holy law. And I think we need to understand that if we have good laws in this country, that people will want to come here for its protection, because even though our laws are in many ways corrupted, there is in them still a memory of common law justice, of equity, of biblical claims upon justice. They're still there, even though they are in many ways corrupted and polluted, and even good laws are ignored and bad laws punitively enforced. Even those things are true. There still is in this country, as understood by people around the world, many opportunities in this country and many freedoms. Not to say that we don't have reforms to make. Now, go to Nooganomics.com if you want to read about reforms and the Christian church. I have today a disquisition, the problem of which is perhaps that I didn't know where to cut it. But it's a review of the church in Chattanooga and the question of the big God or the small God. Is the God that your Christian friend worships in his church, is it the big God or the small God? And in a way, there are two, as projected by God's people in their pulpits here in Chattanooga. Some churches are the big God or churches, and others are the small God or churches. And I'm going to ask you, how would you define God in terms of the application of the scriptures to all of life? And the small God or church sees Christianity as a system for the individual, an individual who can rebuild and reconstruct himself in his heart, right, and in his personal relationships. And that's as far as the gospel goes. There's no broader interest. There's no cultural, economic, medical, military, monetary, legal, academic interest in Christianity beyond the individual. And the big God or churches, if we have them here, they have a much broader and more important claim. In fact, I'd say that if there's a missionary effort that goes and teaches the small God or version of Christianity, that it's gonna have a hard time going. But a missionary effort, say one sponsored by First Presbyterian Church downtown, which I think gave away almost $1 million for mission effort. The big God or mission efforts, they are all about cultural transformation, changing court systems, changing economic systems, changing market systems, drawing back regulators, allowing liberty and equity in those countries. That's the God that is really taught in the Bible, I'm suggesting. Go to Nooganomics.com, our chief sponsor, to find out more about this important argument. It's an important argument, and I'd like you to give me some time. Just give me a little time. David Tulis, Nooga Radio, and Nooganomics.com.
Traffic, news, and information. Nooga Radio. Digital FM 95.3 HD4.